Next pedal we're going to work with is this Behringer Vintage Tube Monster. Now this is a little odd sized pedal, and it has a few other things that we have to give some consideration to in terms of how we're going to mount it. For example, if we look at the bottom of this pedal, you'll notice that there are 6 screws that basically hold the bottom plate to the pedal. But we also have these rubber feet. And these rubber feet are kind of going to get in our way, and the way we're going to mount this board is not going to be with Velcro, but with the bike chain links. So the first thing we have to do is get rid of these rubber feet, and you can just use a small flathead screwdriver and fit it underneath there and just basically pry those up and peel them up and set them aside. If you want to hang on to them later, if you decide to sell the pedal, or if you decide to mount it differently or whatever, you can set them aside. But basically just pry off these and set them aside, and that's going to give us a nice flat mounting surface for our pedal. Just gently pry those up, they're just glued on. Occasionally you'll have feet on the bottom of pedals that you need to remove that are actually screwed through it. There'll be a screw through the middle of the pedal standoff or foot. For example, Vox wahs, some of the Dunlop wahs are set up with these types of mounts, and you just basically would take your screwdriver and unscrew the screw from the center of that, lift the entire thing off, pull the screw out, and set the foot aside, and then we continue on from there. Now, as far as how we're going to mount this Behringer, we're going to remove some of these screws, insert our bike chain between the screw head and the actual pedal itself, and then reinstall the screw. And that will give us a bracket that we can then screw the other side of it into the board and thus mount the pedal directly to the board that way. So we're going to start with these 2 bottom screws here, and we're going to remove them with a screwdriver. Sometimes it might be a little tricky. It might take a little bit of doing to get the screws out. That one's a little bit easier. We'll start with that. You just remove one screw, and then you're going to insert this through the screw like that, and then put it back on to the pedal itself. And then you're going to continue this step for all of the mounting screws that you need. Now you want at least a couple of points on the board or on the pedal to be tied into the board. The more that you do, the more stable it's going to be in terms of the pedal staying adhered to the board and not wiggling around when you stomp on the foot switches. If you're real heavy with your foot, you're going to love these as far as the mounting method, because the pedal stays in place. There's none of the wiggle or instability that you can get with Velcro. Sometimes the pedal, you hit it with your foot, it feels like it's going to go to the side or something. If you're really heavy with your foot, you might knock it completely off the Velcro. This is going to screw directly into our board now. So we're going to put screws at these 2 places here to actually physically bolt this thing right into the board. And we're going to also do a couple extra screws on the side so that we know that we have the pedal mounted in at least 4 spots, and that will keep it nice and firm on the board. Okay, now that we've got the bike chain links mounted to the cable or to the bottom of the pedal itself, we're ready to set it onto the board and install the pedal straight to the board. Now at this point you want to make sure that you leave yourself enough room here for your cables. And we can plug in one of the Planet Waves pedal board jacks into that point, and this is how much spacing we need to leave. And remember, we set this up earlier as we were doing our board layout, but you want to make sure you have enough room. Now if you're going to need to be able to get in there and out of there at some point, you may want to build your cables first, especially if the 2 pedals that are being interconnected are locked down with these type of bike chain link mounts. In the case of this pedal, because it is on a Velcro mount, we'll be able to pick that up later. So for right now, we're just going to use the Planet Waves pedal and the 1/4 inch jacks as spacers to make sure that we're leaving ourselves sufficient room for the two pedals to sit side by side and still have the cabling between them. So we're going to go like this, line up our pedal. That looks like that's the position that we want. Now I'm going to actually mark these, just kind of put a little hole through the wood, through the center of the bike chain link to mark where I want to drill my holes. Okay, now that we've drilled some small pilot holes, we can actually mount the screws straight into the board. And they just basically go through the other eye of the bike chain link. And you can use a screw gun, you can use a regular screwdriver. These are number 6 by 1/2 inch wood screws. They're very short, very small. They only have to be big enough to sit through that hole and properly mount the pedal straight into the actual wood itself. Now sometimes, depending on the design of your pedal itself, you may not have enough clearance to use your drill in there, in which case just go to a standard screwdriver and use that instead. As you can see, that pedal's not going anywhere. I can sit there and pull on that thing. It's mounted nice and firmly. And that's how we put down an odd size pedal that has the screws close enough to the end that we can use the bike chain links as our brackets. In some cases, you might have those screws that are further back from the edge to where the bike chain links don't extend far enough outwards for us to mount directly into the pedal board. So in a case like that, you might want to use pipe tape to fashion a longer bracket to where you can mount the back end of the tape to the pedal and then have it extend far enough outward to put a screw into the board. Sometimes you have to kind of figure something that's going to work based on the design of the pedal. In this case, the bike chains are long enough to serve as our brackets, so we went ahead and used those here.